I'm so happy to have all of you here and to be having this event here at the Oneida Community Mansion House. For those of you who haven't been, the history of this place is fascinating. And I hope if you haven't already to make sure to sign up for a tour at the end of the day so you can get kind of the full story. Learn a little more about this place because it has a really fascinating history. So just to kind of talk about it briefly, John Humphrey Noyes founded the Oneida community as a perfectionist religious communal society in the mid-1800s. Members of the Oneida community were fearless social experimenters. They experimented with communal living. Over 300 people at one point lived in this house in various outbuildings. They experimented with sex and gender norms. They practiced male continence, and they elevated the status of women in a lot of important ways. So hopefully you do go on the tour, you'll see the library. And the library here rivaled many academic libraries of its day, and men and women would be there studying and reading side by side at a time when that wasn't very common. They also experimented with various working arrangements. They held what they called bees, and they'd have these intergenerational working groups to rake leaves or do other tasks around the house and grounds. They also, recognized the importance of outreach. So they, unlike some other similar religious communities, they invited the public to come see how they lived and see what they were up to. And they also did a lot of work, and traded with the Oneida Nation on whose ancestral lands were now holding this conference. So they have a lot going on. And Tom can tell the history a lot more compellingly than I can, but I think there's a lot that can be. There's some parallels. Obviously, the details are very different, but I think there's a lot of similarities with the library community as well. When they felt that their experiment wasn't working here, they had the courage to change course. They dissolved the community. They moved on. They went into the joint stock company and made silverware. So they kind of, they were all over the place in a really interesting way. And like I said, well, the details may differ. Libraries share this similar spirit of adaptability and experimentation. And our program today reflects that. So our keynote panel on generative AI shows how we're adaptable. We find and grapple with new technologies and find ways to incorporate them and help our patrons and help our public with them. We also are experimenters. So our lightning talks will cover various projects funded by our new initiatives, grants, and our ARPA funding that we received. And that will, show some of the experiments and some of the projects that our members have undertaken over the last couple of years. And finally, our poster session will explore various aspects of like patron and workplace interactions. That's a very broad generalization. There's some really interesting posters, especially from the titles. So I encourage you guys all to explore those at the end of the day. We're going to have posters and networking and tours kind of all happening at the end. So I hope everybody can stick around and participate in that. But before we get to all that, I want to introduce Tom Geiler. He's the director of museum affairs here at the Mansion House. And Tom's been a great partner in several respects over the last few years. They have successfully received several access and digitization grants to digitize various project collections here at the Mansion House. And they've also been really key partners with the Consider the Source initiative that we did with the Archives Partnership Trust. We actually held an event in this very space where we had K-12 educators presenting on lesson plans and materials related to primary source documents. So it's been a pleasure to work with you over the years. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you to say a few words.
Thank you, Ryan. I think you were like reading my notes.
Sorry, I stole your
It's okay. No worries. So I'm Tom Geiler. I'm director of museum affairs here at the Oneida Community Mansion House. Thank you all so much for coming here to this National Historic Landmark for your annual conference. And I think it's the first one in person since COVID, so welcome. It's such a pleasure to have such a great organization here for the day. I've been fortunate to be a member of CLRC for a number of years and are grateful for all your support, especially in the generous grant making to help digitize some of our materials and the Consider the Source endeavor. So some thank yous. Thank you to Ryan and Anna and Rebecca and Ashley and Fran for CLRC for doing all the work in organizing this and getting the program together, as well as to Chelsea, Kelly, Lori, Mary Jo, Chris, Mike, and the whole Mansion House team for putting that vision into action and finding all the chairs for all of you guys today. We're really looking all over the place. That's okay. A little housekeeping. In the event of emergency, the closest exits are going to be out this door if you're in this room. Also, if you're in the lounge, which is the other room you're in, those two doors on either the south end and the north end are also open for you. Restrooms, we have a number just out here by the breakfast bar, as we call it. There's two restrooms there. There's also in that hallway, many of you came down where guest rooms are. There's two gender neutral bathrooms in the hallway and then at the end of the hallway for your use. There's plenty more, but if you need more, just holler at a staff member, they'll point you in the right direction. So, as Ryan said, you're gathering today at the home of the Oneida Community Mansion House, the home of one of the most radical utopian communities in American history. For over 30 years, 300 people lived here, sharing all material things in common, practicing the form of group marriage, raising children in common, and believing that they were bringing heaven to earth, all while challenging many norms of the 19th century. They were firm believers in education, and at the heart of that was their library, a space with over 3,500 volumes and also housed subscriptions to well over 100 periodicals, a place where men and women learn together in common. So libraries have been important here for well over 160 years, and it's an honor to host this group of library professionals here today. If you're interested in learning more about the history of this place, we'll be having truncated 30 to 45-minute tours. The main tour is well over an hour usually. And it's really going to be pretty focused on the 19th century story. So just a further incentive to come back and do the whole tour. But we'll be doing those at 2:30 and 3 p.m. I know that they're filling up, if not filled, so we'll try to add some more folks to that. So if it is filled, just see someone at the desk and put your name on like an auxiliary list and we'll sort you out from there. But again, thank you so much for coming. Enjoy the day.
Thank you, Tom. Well, and we're going to launch right into things. So if our panelists want to come on up for our keynote panel. Make sure I have the right script in front of me. So generative AI is kind of having a moment, and it's hard to plan for a keynote months in advance and feel whether it's going to be relevant or how we're going to handle that so far in advance. And I think it's exciting to be talking about such a fast-moving topic, and I'm really excited to be doing it with these three folks. I want to say a little bit about generative AI. I don't want to make any assumptions for anybody. Generative AI is really an umbrella term. It covers a lot of emerging tools that are built on various sets of data models. One way to think of them is like autocomplete on steroids. So they're using patterns that are identified and trying to kind of build past whatever prompt or whatever text that they're given as input. And they're using very large sets of data and very large amounts of processing to do that work. The tools that have garnered the most attention beginning like late last year or over the winter at least were chatbots like OpenAI's ChatGPT, which many of you have probably heard of, Microsoft Bing, which uses some of the same technology, and Google's like, hey, wait, we got to be doing something too, so they launched something called Bard that uses their own model. And there's a variety of other ones beyond those, but those are some of the big ones, chatbot ones. And then there's also been a number of image generators, so DALL-E, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. Again, there's plenty more than that. There's new ones all the time, and then even some of the chatbots are now generating images, which gets confusing. You know, I think it's important, and you know, as librarians, to grapple with emerging technology, and it's kind of, you know, especially important because of the impact that these technologies have the potential to have on society. I would really compare it to the impact that the advent of the internet had a number of years ago. It's uncertain, it's unwritten, it's going to have positive and negative implications. You know, I think anybody who says it's all bad or all good, they're fooling themselves. And you know, there's been quite a bit of work happening on this lately. There was kind of this initial wave over the winter where everybody was talking about ChatGPT and didn't really understand it, and they were asking it silly questions and seeing what it would sit back at you. And then there's a little bit of a lull where everybody's trying to catch up with the technology. And now, just in the last few months, there's been a lot of announcements. Like I mentioned before, the chatbots generating images and new versions of some of those image generators as well. Major companies and small startups alike are trying to rush into the space and try to figure out what to do with it. And sometimes it often feels like they're doing it faster than any reasonable person could keep up with, and faster than we can really consider the consequences of what they're doing, which is problematic when you're talking about technology that can be very powerful. So, but kind of that preamble, this panel is really intended as a conversation. I'm going to ask some questions of the three panelists, but I also invite questions from you all. I think you know, we're all figuring this out together, so that's kind of the exciting part of it. And this isn't a panel of experts necessarily. Not that you guys don't all have your own expertise in this, but I think it's when I envisioned this, it was like, okay, well, let's take three different types of three librarians using it in three different types of areas, and kind of see what they're up to. And so we have Erin Cassidy, who's the manager of the Northern Onondaga Public Library's Brewerton branch. And so she's representing the public librarian perspective. Kathy Brewer is the, what's your title? The media librarian, the Madison and Boise School Library System. So representing the school library perspective. And finally, last but not least, John Stawarz is the online learning librarian at Syracuse University Libraries, and he's kind of grappling with this in an academic setting. So that all aside, I want to ask a question first of you all. Who has used a chatbot like OpenAI professionally or just for fun? About half or more of the audience. That's cool. Anybody use image generators like Dolly, Midjourney? Able to use it. Okay, fewer people using image generators. That's probably to be expected. But okay, so we have kind of, you know, a lot of you probably have a lot of opinions about this technology too. So you know, just because we have a panel of people up front, I hope we can continue the conversation throughout the day as well. All right, so the first question I have for these folks is how are you or your colleagues using generative AI with your patrons? And how are you using it with your own work? So how are you using it with patrons? How are you using it in your own work? And can I go down the line if you guys want to just say a few words?
All right, so before I was the branch manager of Noble Brewerton, I was the reference librarian at Noble Brewerton. And in that capacity, I was doing a lot of adult programming. And I first encountered ChatGPT in a YouTube video. I'm on YouTube a lot, chronically, I would say. And I was watching a pair of makers use ChatGPT to get prompts for a job that they were doing, a craft. And they were like, ChatGPT, tell us what sort of craft we should do. And they asked it a series of prompts. As it fed them information, they asked additional information, kind of like a reference interview. And so I was like, wow, people can access this for free. This is something we really, really need to be doing in a public setting because the public can get to it. And so in that respect, I was like, we need to develop a program. And so I put on a program in July, and the video for it is up on our YouTube, and it's one of our most watched videos for Nopal this year. And so, great, cool. And then I had this thought, as a reference librarian, am I going to be replaced by ChatGPT? You know, it's that fear. So I did, my first session with ChatGPT was something like, you know, give me some recommendations based on my, you know, my reading preferences. And one of my favorite books is Day of Fallen Night by Shannon. And I was like, give me some recommendations for this, you know, high fantasy, large book with a queer aspect to it. And dragons. And ChatGPT was, what I was seeing was that it was giving me the books that everyone's reading. It wasn't drilling down at all. It was very surface level. And I'm like, I can do way better than this. No problem at all. No worries. So that was sort of my first dip my toe into the generative AI world. YouTube has opened up a lot of conversations for me specifically about creators, how AI is getting this data, what the ethics are, all that kind of stuff. I got some great recs if you want to talk to me afterwards. But as far as personal side, I play Dungeons and Dragons. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And so sometimes you have an idea for a character and you can't, I'm not a big art person. And so I was like, hey, you know, Dolly, let's see if we can get this character working. And so I've had some fits and starts with that. But yeah, that's basically my bag.
All right. Great. So I am, like Ryan said, more on the school library side. And my first encounter really with ChatGPT, or how I heard of it, was more the panic side of, oh my goodness, there's this new thing, and we're not essays. It can write essays for kids. They're not gonna, you know, nobody's gonna need to write essays. They're gonna use it for cheating. So I started my research with that lens of how can this be used for cheating? So I asked it, you know, some of the first prompts I asked it were to write me an essay about things. And, you know, similar to you, I thought, it's all right, but it's not, and it gets repetitive. And so I also was trying to prepare for a workshop to help our school librarians prepare to deal with ChatGPT use in school, help their teachers prepare and help them be prepared to be able to understand what ChatGPT does, how it does it, what it's good at, what it's not good at, and how possibly some ideas to combat, I guess, its use, right? But while I was doing that, I mean, one of the first things I really realized was ChatGPT wasn't intended to be a tool for cheating. That's just a unfortunate side effect. You know, like many of things like social media, you could say, there's things that no one saw coming, right? They didn't say, oh, that's going to be used for that. So through that, I started to realize, you know, it could really be used as its intended purpose as a tool, a productivity tool to help teachers take some of those more mundane tasks and free up their time to do other things. So it kind of shifted a little my workshop to be more touch on that side too, is how can you use ChatGPT in your job to as a productivity tool. So that started to be a little more exciting and, you know, not as scary as, oh my goodness, we're never going to be able to assign an essay again. So that's what I've been doing mainly. And as far as using it, you know, I use it a little bit it's great at brainstorming. And like you said, like thinking up ideas or things that it'll give you lots of ideas that maybe you would have come to in 30 minutes, but it's going to give them to you in 5 seconds. So things like that. And think that's, personally, I haven't used it a whole lot, but I hear it can like create a recipe. If you tell it you have like chicken and broccoli in your fridge, you can be like a chef. So
Using it as a tool and using it to its strength instead of expecting it to spit out like factual information.
well,
Like, that's-
exactly, because that's one of my big things is it's a tool, it's not a source.
Yeah,
And if you're using it as a source, you're using it completely wrong.
Yeah.
It's not a source, and that's where, we run into trouble because it doesn't do facts. So, yeah.
John?
Yeah, so I would say this spring, I didn't expect to work with AI at all as a consumer or user of AI. It was kind of handed to me as something that, as the online learning librarian, I should really know something about to be able to help other people. So the last 4 or 5 months, I've really kind of jumped in the deep end, a lot of webinars. I took a class through ACRL, through the ALA, on AI and how it's used at critical information literacy. I should say I'm in the information literacy department at my university. And so helping others use and understand AI tools is a really big part of my job. I would say the first thing that a library could do that we did is really try to understand through all the different stakeholders that you have, what different needs they have in terms of AI, both external stakeholders in your community, for us faculty and students, really grappling with how to use AI with cheating issues and things like that, but really also internal stakeholders. So how should people, library staff also understand and use these tools? And so things that I've done, I've held a workshop for really for students at my university about AI, just an introduction. We also included a section on how to use AI tools ethically for assignments. And so not telling them not to use AI, because some will, but how to use it ethically, cite your sources, be transparent with your instructors. If your instructors say don't use AI, then follow their guidance for that as well. But really trying to help students navigate it. And one thing I was really surprised at is I aimed that at undergraduates and graduates, but there were a good number of faculty and staff members also who signed up for the workshop, just trying to get a sense of how to handle that as well. So that's one way. Whenever I do library instruction sessions, I usually mention AI now and just to students, just because it's a whole different way of engaging with information and what is information nowadays as well. So we're working on a presentation for library staff. I think it's really important for everyone to have kind of a common language and understanding of AI. There's a lot of it's going to cause the apocalypse in the next few weeks. Thoughts around there. So just getting a good sense of like what AI is in a non-threatening way. It's here. We have to deal with it, whether we like it or not, and just kind of step away from the fear factor of that and understand what its capabilities are and impacts, like Ryan said, pluses and minuses. So those are some ways it's impacting our library. We do a lot of copyright guidance at our libraries. And so copyright in AI is a huge issue, whether you can create new materials with AI in terms of, there's been lawsuits by authors whose books have been scraped to create new content. But also if you use AI to create new content, can that be copyrighted? So that's certainly an issue. So I know it's a really important part of the library in terms of just being prepared to answer questions to engage with our stakeholders. So we're in the middle of drafting a new strategic plan, and I believe AI comes up at least 2 places in the new plan that we hope to be a campus, a place for people on campus to turn to. We'll partner with other people on campus who have other similar expertise or tangential expertise, related to AI, computer scientists and things like that, but really be a place that people could turn to get a sense of what AI is. And the only way that I understand the library has looked at AI in terms of its workflow, and this actually took place a few years ago before COVID, was that our Belfer audio archives, part of our special collections, had been looking into whether it could use AI to identify what musical instruments are in recordings. And that was put on hold because of COVID, from what I understand, but possibly that might be brought up again as a tool for libraries to actually use AI, not just support other patrons.
That's cool.
So
yeah, and I think that's a good way to think about it as another like avenue for information literacy training. Like it's just another tool. It's another way to think about how information is generated and distributed. Yeah, thank you guys. So the next question I have for you guys, and you guys have touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can take a deeper dive. what sorts of caveats or caution you have when using generative AI? Are there certain applications where it just doesn't work? So like, what are our warning signs? Which we
There's
try
a
to
lot.
avoid?
Yeah,
I mean, you got a whole lot about this, but
for sure.
just in short.
So a great YouTube video I watched was by Cleo Abram, and the title is AI will save us, AI will kill us. Huh? So there's a lot of like,
Yeah.
I don't know, this back and forth between like, this is a big problem or this is a solution to all of our problems. So I would say a big caveat that I have is an ethical stance, and we don't know where this data is coming from. We don't know what the models look like. AI is a black box. It's a perfect black box, meaning that we don't know how it gets from your inputs to what it's giving out.
Mhm.
And so there is, so I'm going to bring up Kate Vrendenberg, who's a scholar and recently published a paper, and it's about the right to an explanation. And so if AI is being used as a tool to make a decision of some kind, perhaps it's an admissions decision to college, for example, and AI rejects you, then Kate says you have a right to an explanation to understand how you could improve whatever you've done to then have a better chance of succeeding. And so in the situation we have now, where AI doesn't have that option, really, I think it's very important as we go forward. If you are contracting with vendors, AI vendors, or vendors who have some AI component that you want to use, ask about right to an explanation. How are they going to decrypt, if you will, or make that information more transparent for you and the people that rely on your work?
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make as well. You know, the company that's maybe the forefront of this, OpenAI, is
Very open.
You know, it maybe started off with assumption that they could do this openly, but they very quickly have shut down and become more and more of a black box and sharing less of their research and less of their process and less about how it's happening, which is troubling. And definitely the identifying what's happening is an important part of this for us to all understand it.
I think one of the big caveats and things that I've found that, in my workshops, people didn't really understand is that, one, it doesn't search the internet, right? It's not getting real-time information from the internet, although GPT-4 apparently now has a built-in component with Bing. But ChatGPT itself, the 3.5 free research preview, the cutoff date is September of 2021. So if there's things after that, it doesn't necessarily know about them. It may pretend to know about them. It tries to, but GPT-4 now has a cutoff date of January of 2022, but that's still not recent.
Yeah.
And that's the paid $20 a month version. So that's one of the big things is, when we would have educators come, they would think it's gonna, it's searching the internet. They didn't understand that large language model had been pre-trained way back, and now that's its knowledge base and it's cut off. So that's one thing. And then it doesn't understand math. It doesn't do order of operations, because the way a large language model works is it's just reconstructing words back into pattern. What it thinks is the predicting the pattern that you want. So it doesn't really answer math questions. You can't 100%, it's not going to be able to be used as a calculator. That's not its function. So anything like that, and facts in general, it makes up books. Like you talked about getting book right. Like it'll just make up book titles.
Yeah.
I asked it once about books about Abraham Lincoln for a third grader to research Abraham Lincoln, and it spit out a bunch of books. I started looking at it and like, those books aren't even real. What's this? So,
But it'll write it.
but
Yeah.
and it does it like completely confident too. Like, here you go.
Well, and there are other models of AI or other ways of structuring AI that are logic based, but those are harder to build. They take longer time.
Yeah,
They're more time consuming. So we might see more of that in the future, but that's.
Right, we're
it's
not
a lot
there.
easier to just kind of throw a bunch of data at it and hope for the best, is kind of what the current is.
yeah.
John?
The only thing that I add is almost every webinar that I attend, someone mentions this internal Microsoft document that's become a little bit famous, and it says that AI isn't meant to be truthful, it's meant to be persuasive. And when I think about AI, that is a really helpful way for me to frame AI. So it's very persuasive in coming up with these fake books and fake citations. It'll happily give you the top 10 places to visit in New York City, even though they may not be the top 10 places by any stretch of the imagination. So but there's so many unknowns. What is this? What are the models trained on? It's trained on Reddit, and that's not a great place for information necessarily. And so just so many unknowns. And if you, I think, go into AI thinking that it's going to give you truth and facts, and that's the a huge issue right there. So if you go with another frame, I think that's a great way to approach it.
So, thank you. So I couldn't resist in coming up with questions about generative AI to ask generative AI what questions I should ask some panel librarians. And I'm going to ask this one kind of as a little bit of a straw man. This is from ChatGPT. Do you think generative AI could assist in personalizing recommendations for library patrons? You can touch on this a little bit.
Yeah, so
Pose it to you guys.
sure. So I think that it's not great at it, to be perfectly honest. I think exactly what Kathy said, it makes stuff up. And so you can ask it, it'll give you, the top 3 bestsellers that movies were based on in the past 3 years, and then it'll give you some stuff that's made up. So no.
Right. And again, that cutoff date, it doesn't know about
Yeah.
recently published books.
Yeah.
But I do think that you could use it to help you, because what you could use it for is to get different ideas for searches you could use in your own catalog or something. You could get different keywords, or you could say, if I want to find books about blah, 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 what are some keywords I could use to search for those books? And it will give you bunches of great keywords. There's also, I just saw something called Talpa.ai. Have you heard of it at all? So it's actually an AI that is being integrated into, and you can go to www.talpa.ai and try it out. It's being integrated into library catalogs, and it's from Library Thing, and you can tell it. I tried it. I said, what I'm looking for a book that has a red cover that has a middle school boy. It's about a middle school boy. And sure enough, that thing pops up, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, #1. And that's the book I was thinking of, but it also brought up like a few others that have a red cover. And about a middle school boy. So that's interesting. I don't know.
Well, that brings up an interesting point that I think is where we are in time too. So a lot of these generative AI are generalists. They're trying to do just like ChatGPT is not made for anything specifically. But we're starting to see more and more of those specific, because everybody needs an AI like
There's an AI for everything. There's a website called that.
Even if it has no real business being there, but people feel, companies feel obligated to stay ahead of the curve kind of things. I think you'll see more of the custom built stuff that's maybe slightly better at certain tasks than it would have been otherwise.
Well, apparently what they're using is data from Library Things cover guess game or something. There's a game that guess this cover or something, and it's been around since 2010. So they've collected all the data from that game, and now that's what they're using to train the AI for this kind of book searching AI technology. It's pretty interesting.
John?
I would just point to, where the best data would be to make these recommendations. And I still personally go to Amazon, even though, what other customers have purchased if they've looked at this book. And I think that might be, higher quality at this point than what AI is able to tap into. But, a month from now, a year from now, that might change. But there might be, different data sets that are more important that AI doesn't have access to. So if I wanted to plot a bike path, for example, AI, I'm sure would, ChatGPT would give me a bike path, but if I wanted to use one that's flatter and more realistic, then I would probably go to a biking app that has more real information that real users have used. And so if there's another place that you can go with more richer data and more accurate data, I would probably go to that as well.
Yeah. My next question, I'm gonna switch the order, so John doesn't always have to feel like he's.
Yeah, right? Sorry.
And you actually might have some good ideas for this. What are some of the resources that libraries and librarians can use to learn more about generative AI?
So I would say, library organizations, CLRC, ALA, ACLA are doing a really great job of boosting the awareness and education about AI. So emails almost every day, there's something that comes out related to AI. Lots of free webinars that you can get, probably a lot of them on YouTube as well. Those are probably my go-to sources, just going through library associations, because I'm looking for things that are more relevant to what libraries could do with AI or are doing with AI. Another place that I go, libraries have created a lot of research guides, what we call LibGuides for AI. And so if you just Google search LibGuide, artificial intelligence, that should point you to a lot of resources. Some might be more focused on academic libraries, but those are a great place to go. But I also think that some of the mainstream press does a great job. New York Times, Washington Post, I think they have some really good reporters working on AI with great topics, great introductions to these topics as well. So those are places that I probably go to first.
Right.
Yeah, to add to that, I think the only thing I can say really is just use it yourself.
Yeah.
Like that's your best way to learn about it. Get in there and just try all kinds of different things and just keep using it. And I mean, you could even, if you wanted to, like create like a group or a task force or something with people at your libraries or works where you're going to kind of use it, meet up, talk about it. That could be fun. But
And every month or week, there would be something new in
yeah,
the news.
yeah,
Or,
I mean,
a resources wise.
it's out of control how many new AI tools there are every day.
Yeah.
Especially education, like related I mean, that's on my radar, but.
If I could send you to one YouTube channel, it would be Corridor Crew. And this is maybe a little bit out there. They aren't librarians, but they are
I love YouTube.
yeah, it's great. They are people who make graphics for movies and things like that, and they sort of demystify that process, and they are using the video sort of AI and the image AI to sort of see what they can do, push the boundaries, if you will. It's very watchable. But that's sort of an aspect that I'm less familiar with, but just seeing, they talk about deep fakes, they talk about, body switching, they talk about all that kind of stuff that they're doing in movies. And so it's going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so, people are going to start using these tools every day.
Right. I have one more prepared question I'm going to ask the panel, then I'm going to open it up. So start thinking about if you want to have questions or comments that you want to, share after this one. And I'm going to ask this question kind of in two ways. You can use kind of how you want to answer it. Kind of looking towards the future with generative AI and librarianship. Are there certain developments you see happening or coming, or that can be hard to predict the future, especially right now? Are there things you'd like to see come, or tools that you'd like to see developed around this in this area? Let's start with John.
Yeah. So what comes to mind, it's always going to change, and I think right now we're focused on helping patrons in our community understand AI, but I'd really love to make that turn to using AI as a tool for ourselves. Like I mentioned, our audio archives, using AI in our workflow and our cataloging, if that's something that could be meaningful for them, but just look for ways to help us, and not just in a reactive way, but in a way that is meaningful and saves us time and in our workflow. I have no idea what that could be. I don't know if there's anything that's trustworthy yet that we could do that with, but certainly I imagine a year from now that's something that we'll look into even further.
So I kind of hope that it will transform education a little bit, because that idea that, that panic of ChatGPT can do my homework. Well, maybe you need to rethink your homework or rethink your assignment and really help teachers to transform that, helping students to develop the human skills that as we move forward with AI and robots being more a part of our lives, because it's not going away. So helping teachers to teach students those human skills, like being collaborative, empathy. These are things robots are never going to be good at. Critical thinking and really, maybe the AI almost forces us to make some changes that we should have been making already.
Yeah, I really like that, that's a good test. If your homework assignment can be done, or your assignment can be done by AI, then maybe that's not a good assignment. And I think, you
Right.
kind of go way back and say, okay, like the advent of calculators, if you can be done by a calculator, then why are you,
Right.
Obviously there's some caveats to that, but like if there's, or I'm thinking more like graphic calculators and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about what that says about what you're teaching, how you're teaching it.
Yeah.
Right. And what's really important? What do you really want the students to gain from it?
Is that a skill?
Right. And are they really going to be able to gain that if ChatGPT can do it for them? Because what's going to set them apart in the future for a job is their ability to do something a robot can't do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what's going to make them competitive.
So as far as where I want AI to go, I would love AI to be more transparent. I would love to know how you get from A to B.
Yeah.
I assume there's going to be a niche for that, especially for libraries. And I would also like to hear less and less of stories of people, having to like look at terrible pictures and violence to grade them and put keywords on them, because that's now a feature of some generative AI. And so I think just being able to demystify how it works would be amazing.
Yeah, I think that would help people understand it better, because one of the interesting things about generative AI is people, when they're chatting with some of these chatbots, and not necessarily all the time, but they're meant to feel like they're chatting with a human, and they're clearly not.
Mhm.
So like demystifying that might
Yeah.
also help kind of pull down the curtain and say, okay, you're talking to a bunch of data.
Yes.
You're not talking to anything that's, intelligent in any meaningful sense.
On the flip side, you mentioned that starting to label things that have been created with the help of AI would be helpful. I got duped.
Exactly.
I bought this book from Ingram thinking that it was legitimate, and I suspect that it might have been written by ChatGPT. So I will show this to you on request, but it's anyway.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Adobe's working on some like icon for images, but if Adobe does it, you gotta have everybody else do it, otherwise, it's gonna be meaningless.
Yeah.
John, did you have something else to say?
Yeah, building on that, there was also a bill introduced this week at the New York Assembly. I don't know if anyone saw this, but its purpose would be to require publishers to label books like this as being AI generated.
Great.
And so, certainly questions like if an author does use AI, how much is enough to trigger this label? But it's one way that the kind of the ecosystem might be regulated. Who knows what other ways that might be as well, but that could really change AI usage in the future.
Well, this didn't really come up in our conversation, but like there's all those checkers that claim that they can identify text that was generated by AI, but they've never been as good as they say they are, and I can't imagine that it's going to get any better as the technology gets better.
Yeah.
So like, I think there's definitely an ethical component to all this.
Yeah.
I want to kind of open this up more on comments or questions or things they want to.
I have a comment and 2 questions. So my experience with AI and using it to prompt things, I kind of can't stand it because for me, the responses always sound like a really preppy cheerleader, like it's throwing me in like, this is wonderful, and it like immediately turns me off, and I'm like, you're not giving any insightful advice.
It really does.
It's annoying, I'm obnoxious. So a question for you, Erin. Since you did the practice of recommending the book, have you done it recently? Was that a while, or have you recreated that?
As far as like getting book recommendations,
Yeah.
going through like a reference interview.
Or like for the book that you wanted to see and that would recommend you based on.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I was prepping for that program. That program was in July, so it was probably March, April, May time period. And I haven't I haven't touched it since then as far as like trying to get it to recommend books to me.
Okay.
Yeah. And it moves so quickly that it could be a
Yeah.
completely different ballgame at this point.
Yeah.
If I could also add, I would recommend trying different tools as well. So
Absolutely.
not just ChatGPT, Google Bard, because playing around with it, I asked ChatGPT if someone my age could still have a career in the NBA. And ChatGPT basically said, here are 8 reasons why you will never have a career in the NBA. But Google Bard said, you know, the odds are against you. Here's statistics. There are some older players. And if you wanted to learn how to play basketball, find a local league, get some experience. And it was a little bit more I guess positive, but just different engagement. So you may have more success in a different tool.
So when do you start?
Still in training.
And
You got a question?
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. My second question, you work with professors at Syracuse about ChatGPT. Have you ever talked to anyone who's like interested in the art aspect of it, and like what is their my cousin works at O'Neill in the art department.
Mhm.
He feels like ChatGPT, because it's generating all these images, it's gonna put more value on like human art. Had conversations with people about that, or
I haven't had those conversations.
Okay.
I'm sure some of our librarians have. Yeah, will it put more value? Will it put artists on the sidelines? That's a really good question. I don't know what the impact would be.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I'll find out.
Yeah.
Scott?
Response to that. So I've run 3 AI programs in the last year, the last 9 months actually. And we did an AI art show. So we had patrons use Midjourney to make art. And then we did a month-long show in our gallery
Yeah.
space. So we had lots of people coming through and looking at it and giving us feedback. And the overwhelming feedback on it was that it was amazing and scary, but it prompted a really interesting debate about whether or not creativity is in the artist or the tools. Because if you know how to sculpt, are the chisel and the marble really what matter, or is your vision inside that you express through the medium what actually matters? So I think most people actually wound up on the side of like, yeah, I guess that's true. I guess it is still art. And it still puts they were still putting value on the human input, because it's not like it was giving something without a prompt. And that the more creative your prompt was, the more enticing the artwork happened to be. So yeah,
That prompt matters.
How it brings so many
For
more
that art.
questions. Usually when stuff like that brings more questions about other things than it does answers. It's really exciting thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt us.
No, I was just gonna say that prompt really does matter, because I played with like Dolly making art and it was horrendous. I was like, oh, that's like a stick figure. Okay.
And don't ever do hands.
So I think there is something to what you're saying, is how creative you are with the prompt is going to, correlate to how good that actual image ends up looking.
And people have noticed the value of the prompt, and we mentioned in our little chat before that there are marketplaces for prompts now,
Yep,
and
yeah.
that's a commodity
Yeah.
as
you can
well.
buy prompts.
AI prompts.
You can get free prompts. You can ask ChatGPT to help you make a prompt.
Mhm. Yep.
I don't want to sound like, AI is very foreign to me, but the whole time I just keep thinking, I work in a law library in downtown Syracuse, where Syracuse has one of the highest concentrations of poverty in the state, if not the country. and all those issues come along with it, and the whole time I just kept thinking, how does AI deal with human emotion? Because in our world, that thing could probably write you a great citizen complaint, which would be perfect, but if you can't get the person to the point where they can give you the facts. I mean, people come in and they're frazzled, they're upset, they're about to be evicted. I just don't, how does it deal with all those things?
It doesn't.
No.
I think we're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a hand over here? Yes.
I don't, I just have a comment. I watched a YouTube video a while ago, actually, a faculty member talking about as the generative AIs learn to generate prompts, they're going to start talking to each other, and we're going to lose human conversation because they can create so much content so fast, we'll just be buried under it. So it's like, listen to people talk about the creativity of the prompts. I wonder about that Tuesday.
Well, they eat their own food because,
Right.
you know, there's content out there on the internet that was generated by AI that's being scraped by AI to generate more. So like it ends up being a cursive.
Yikes.
Rebecca?
So, when I long ago, when I was in graduate school, I did, work at Euclid's Natural Language Processing Lab, at SU. And, that was like 2006. And it's just, when I look at AI, I understand where the fears and everything like that come from, but I look at it and I'm like, humanity is amazing, you know, just what that ChatGPT can do. All of that was created by people sitting in research labs, we would feed the Enron email data set into it, and we would that had become public domain, and we would run all these programs on it to try and get it to be able to understand, and it couldn't do it, and we would talk about how the translating back and forth, you can't do idioms, you can't do figures of speech. And I've been out of the game for a while because I became a public librarian, and I just dipped a toe into ChatGPT just for fun, what should I have for dinner tonight? And it nailed it. And I was just like, oh my God, in those 20 years, just people sitting in those labs with those computers, feeding those data sets in. I mean, I know that there's things to be worried about and things that it can't do and everything like that, but it's pretty awesome.
It has the potential for exponential growth, because as it can, there are models and statistics where it feeds itself data and then it can verify it. So like AlphaFold, which is kind of outside of our conversation today, but that's through one of the Google labs, and they were trying to come up with different protein structures, and they would use its own data to kind of juice it up a little bit, and they could find it would take a PhD candidate years to come up with a single protein. Now they can do it in minutes.
We actually have a faculty member using that. She would just use some of her presentation. It's been now weeks to find it.
Yeah, and so like in a medical sense, that can be really transformative. And that's outside of, other than medical libraries, it's outside of what we're gonna be dealing with.
It's just really cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It is.
April, go ahead.
I guess I have a comment more than anything. As I'm listening, the critical thinking that Kathy was mentioning is so key, because I remember being a school librarian and teachers might say, oh, write a report about New York State or whatever, and they would just put it in there and print the first page because it would be just the facts, right? So again, asking people for the critical thinking piece of it, and obviously emotions come up. Reading the dinner, they're not AI, it's just my notes I'm making like organs, so. And the calculator, I'm old enough to remember before they were inexpensive and everybody had one, and certainly before people had them on their phone. I mean, is it that important that we can do loss division? People are very concerned. Maybe the concept, understanding what to put into the device, knowing how to use the calculator, knowing the prompts or whatever. And even with the media, it was just like, oh, that's the I look at the sources, original sources, and use these tools that are yourself. I guess they're here, right?
Right.
Trace them, and
Thank you, that point, I was, you much better articulated the calculator analogy. That was much better put. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think you get worried every cycle, like, oh, the internet, Wikipedia, whatever, and I think the librarians, we're a resilient bunch, and we think outside the box, and we leverage the tools instead of being afraid of them. So another hand. Oh, sorry, you're right in line with me in the back.
No, I think, in talking about the creativeness and all of that, I think one of the fears is that we know that screen time interferes with brain elasticity and all of the things going on chemically that creates intelligence in ourselves. So the more we rely on, tools, the less we know that on our own. So I'm wondering if there's any thought to, before we get too far behind the 8 ball, getting some studies and things going about how is this going to affect learning, for individuals, how is this going to affect our ability to creatively think and whatever. I mean, if they're gonna get our prompts for us, we can just sit there like a monk.
Yeah.
But you have to build on. I think that's where we have to use this as scaffold and go beyond the basics. If you just sit there and say, oh, it's gonna find the facts for me or whatever,
Right.
that's.
But it doesn't even do facts.
Yeah.
That's those are the kids are gonna go, yeah, for this thing, no thing.
It's a pumpkin, if you're doing some stuff this thing.
Mhm.
It was, you about to say something, Kathy?
No,
Okay, all right. I feel like I'm
just agree.
answering and responding back to the questions, and I wanna,
Yeah, no.
be right to the panel. Yeah, so in agreement.
So I have a question for the panel. So sometimes when I look at AI, I'm being asked questions, I feel like we have to be the experts in the library. So I was in an instruction session and a faculty member was like, you need to tell my class that it's plagiarism. That's not the library's role. We're not academic integrity. So are there other departments or people in your institution that you are learning AI with and building policy and just trying to get everybody on the same page in your institution? I know academic libraries are different than school library systems, but who else can we go to as we're learning about AI? And I know we will never be the experts, but I do feel like there are days when people are looking at me. You should know this and tell me what to do. So.
Right. I mean, I think like, you could create like a committee or a task force of different stakeholders that maybe it becomes, so it's not just put on you, right? If you could other people, like in a school, if you have teachers, students, administrators, all making those kind of decisions together to create policies.
If I could add, it's not just students who are using ChatGPT, researchers, and I've also heard a case of a professor at my institution who is trying to use ChatGPT to grade short essay answers. And so, yeah, they should definitely be stakeholders in any of these conversations.
So a lot of this discussion has been wondering, like, could we be coming on a time where we actually start thinking more of needing to know the theory behind something, if we can just put the numbers in. We talked about the calculator. Yes, you can just put the numbers in and you get your long division answer. But how much better, but do you also need to know how that, how that answer?
Yeah.
But we need to be able to know if something's going in here.
Absolutely.
I'm an academic librarian and I still tell students, yeah, yes, you can use all these citation management tools, but you still need to know the actual citation format so that you can tell if it makes a mistake.
I absolutely agree with you.
It's not a perfect thing.
Yeah.
Right.
They're giving us, the people who are in charge of generative AI are giving us little things. They're like prompt engineering and personas and whatever it might be. And so they're like, start speaking the language that this tool understands for better prompts. But I think if we knew how the sauce was made or whatever, it would give us even better tools to do.
There's research that shows that bias can be baked into.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it's scraping the internet.
Absolutely biased.
Any algorithm can have bias in it, and it's not total anything.
Mhm.
Just Cure improvements,
Yes.
improvements here.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I think generative AI is not generative, so I think it really is more comments, but I think it's really important to think about how different group of people use it. So, for example, I'm international and I have lots of international students around me. And many of us use it as a translator because it does much better job than other tools out there. So in that case, I always question, especially when I teach students, international students, I think about if someone uses generative AI just as a translator, does it count as like a person, or does it count as like using generative AI for doing their essay? There is so much gray area in here. And I think what's important here is to think about how different people use this, and sometimes it really helps people to get access to something they could not do before, but they may.
Maggie?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, kind of feedback off of, I recently did a, presentation for retired teachers who are interested in learning more about AI. And got some really great feedback from Aaron and also from Scott as far as public librarians go, and really kind of steered the entire presentation towards how to spot fake news, which was an existing presentation that we've all done as some kind of a public program. But I think what I wanted to really do was say thank you to the academic librarians and the full librarians, because at the beginning of the panel, you talked about how you worked and you researched and you did things with the teacher first, or with like your people first. So I guess really what I'm thinking is it's really up to us to try to steer our communities towards recognizing what artificial intelligence is. And I love what my public libraries have done, because Erin, you didn't even mention it, but how did you do your entire program?
So it was basically, I was using ChatGPT as basically a co-presenter in some respects. And so I had it open and I was following along and doing prompts. So it was very
How was ChatGPT as your co-host?
It was good for the purpose that I had intended. For another presentation, maybe not so good.
But I think, I guess really more than anything, what I'm thinking is this, as far as like those of us in the public library go, we are absolutely at a really great position to help more than just students and seniors learn these things. And I kind of resort back to, I'm like, well, we all survived Wikipedia. So I'm pretty sure we can do this one.
So Nancy, we did a program just last night, just the second AI program in a row. So we did from last night, the same thing, we had live GPT, ChatGPT, and yeah, and they did a lot with the images too. I was kind of impressed with the image thing, I have to say. They were doing a Dungeons and Dragons character, and they really got it down to, it was pretty impressive with the mid journey.
Cool.
And there were people in the room and on Zoom for a total of what? Close to 40? Yeah, 35, 40 people in the community.
great.
It's all for the
It's amazing.
Nice.
That's another great outfit. Insert the library in the conversation. That's great way to think about it.
It's the first in a series.
There's a member of the community who I know through a connection with through Rotary, that I got to know the guy, and so he thinks of us for things. And he was the one that came to us, he professionally sells airspace on cell towers. And he came to us and said, hey, how about this? I pulled all the full-time librarians together. There were some concerns about, well, you know what, and how, and came up with this as the intro, and there are people that do want follow-up.
Scott, we have time for like a couple more questions. And then we'll wrap up.
Just quick comment to Katie's question about like, do we know, like, should we know how the calculator works? So when I did the last AI program in August, I had a bunch of teams and I'm pitching a JavaScript class that will be upcoming. And one of the teams was like, well, I could just have chat, Bard write the code. So I was like, okay, what do you want? The program do you want Bard to create for you? So they kind of hesitated. I was like, let's just have Bard write a really quick JavaScript code that prints out the numbers 1 to 100, and then prints out like the Fibonacci sequence. And the team was like, okay, great. So I put that in and it produces code. And I went, is it right? And the team just kind of sat there, and I opened it up to the room. I was like, is it correct? If you put this code, you copied and pasted this into a file, a JavaScript file, and you ran this, would it do what you expected it to do? And everybody kind of hesitantly admitted, no. And I was like, it is right. I was like, but that's the illustrative point. Is like, that might be something you could try to do too with using the AI tools, is demonstrate like, okay, it produces this thing, but if you don't actually know the validity of the answer, then you shouldn't trust it, right? Like there's still value in learning these other skills, because even if it's just to be a check on this other tool that you might start depending.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Dane, and then I'm gonna let you guys have a chance for like any final comments or remarks.
Okay, I'm just gonna piggyback on that, because very related, and it's, I'm curious what you think the response from a librarian curriculum should be to, in terms of how we look at information literacy. You know, is there something that needs to be done differently? Is there a increased focus, or is what I assume this is a big part of librarian training, but you know, what do you think the appropriate response is to something of this magnitude?
So information source evaluation, I'm taking it way back to baseline, CRAAP, currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. That's how we evaluate sources. And I think you can do the exact same thing with ChatGPT, and it hits on all of these notes. So I think we're doing it. We're doing it right.
Yeah, I would also, I'm certainly explaining, helping students understand the context of AI, what it is. Like that's something that we haven't done before, that we need to do, just to, you know, these aren't magic tools. They aren't just magic code generators. Understanding how they work, how they don't work is a really big part of the information literacy process. And so understanding these are all owned by large companies. There's a lot of unknowns about these. Like these are all things, conceptual things that students should learn how to do, but also not just that, but also in other ways, how to engage with the tools. So we've talked about, you know, prompt engineering. That's going to be a really important skill for students. And so when some faculty say, don't use ChatGPT in the class and, you know, for your assignments, you know, that's something that students should learn, in my opinion, because that's something that, you know, future employees and people in the world are going to need. So, so don't just throw it out, but really engage with it as much as possible, I would say.
Yeah.
It's quick, Rob.
One thing that was mentioned is just how dangerous it really could be. There are safeguards in place with these things, but there's always ways to get around them. Such as I would try to get it to write a story once, and if there was a safeguard, it didn't want to do it. I told it to imagine it was being someone else, and that the safeguards didn't exist. I gave the description of exactly who the person was, and then it got completely around the safeguards to write the story I wanted. And you can do that with other things, and they keep adding more safeguards to that kind of stuff. And there are people who've been known for creating explosives and other things that people put into that to get it to work.
Yeah, well, I read one of the most recent articles I read was that it's getting better with facts, but easier to circumvent safeguards. The newer versions of I think that was ChatGPT. You guys want to? You guys have any final thoughts or anything? You know, not too much pressure to kind of wrap it in. Like anything you feel like you wanted to say but didn't have a chance to say.
Yeah, I think use it. Go ahead, it's free. Try it.
That's your best. Yeah, just use it. Just start using it. And the more you use it, you're going to think of other things to use it for.
Yep.
You really do. It's crazy.
And just building on, even if you don't choose to use it, you're going to be forced to use it in a lot of ways. Some of the databases that we subscribe to at my university have built AI now directly into them to create new content based on existing content. And so that's something we could opt out of, as far as I understand. So it's part of the what we offer as resources to our community.
And it's because it's getting in everything, like you see it, like it's all over. It's gonna be in all the Word doc, the Microsoft Office products and
Yeah.
Grammarly and.
Yeah.
And Clippy wasn't annoying.
Oh, gosh, that's funny.
All right, well, I want to thank our
I
panel.
forgot about Clippy.
Great job. And I just want to thank all of you for such great questions and comments and kind of making this a discussion, which is what I was doing. And we're gonna have a 15-minute break, and then we're gonna go right into some lightning talks, and we'll fill in this room. So if we need to use bathrooms or.
Thanks.